Welcome back everyone. Today we'll be discussing the Yeezy 350 Oreo once again. Specifically, we'll be discussing whether you should sell or hold the Yeezy 350 Oreo and why that is. To preface this, if you guys enjoy these types of videos regarding the market, reselling, and even info on how to acquire these limited products, be sure to subscribe and enable post notifications. This way you're always 100% updated. Furthermore, for more urgent updates like the recent shock drops we've seen, follow my Twitter, KeithAdam10, and also personals for you. And of course, for early information before these drops actually occur, follow Endurance's Twitter for updates on the next restock. For those who don't know, the Yeezy 350 Oreo releases on March 12th, tomorrow. Retail will be $230, as we have seen on all the new Yeezy 350s this year. Since this is an Adidas product and not Nike, I cannot confirm the exact stock myself, but I am expecting it to be relatively low in comparison to other recent 350s that we have seen, since so few retailers are receiving them. Since no other retailers aside from Yeezy Supply and Adidas are receiving these within US and EU. In order to determine if the Yeezy 350 Oreo will be a fruitful hold, we will cover an estimated range of what the sneaker will settle at after the drop, and also when shipments come in, essentially the pairs go into circulation, whether they're expected to increase post-drop or even hypothetically decrease, along with how much specifically over specific periods of time, and finally, what type of margin are we looking at for these in terms of holding, not the retail to resale initial margin, but rather just the hold margin over X period of time. Basically, even if these do go up, are they still going to be worth your time or not? Kicking it off, let's discuss the estimated range that these should be settling at. To begin with, as I mentioned earlier, I'm expecting stock on these to be somewhat lower than the typical Yeezy 350, since these appear to only be releasing through Yeezy Supply and Adidas for US and Europe at least, although I'd still expect relatively high stock in general, of course, because it is a Yeezy 350. When it comes to demand, it is extremely impressive. Pre-sale remains very high at the moment, while bids are also looking very healthy. The sale volume, on the other hand, is not as high as you might normally see for a sneaker with demand of this caliber, but that's simply because there are notably less pairs in circulation for these. There are no foot app reservation pre-sellers, there's no finish line early pairs in circulation, and there's very few backdoored pairs since no other retailers are dropping these on this date. The bulk of what is in circulation right now is just remaining dead stock 2016 pairs, so don't be fooled by the sale volume not being up to par with, say, the Yeezy 350 Dazzling Blue that we just saw. Based on the bids alone, demand is looking absolutely insane for these. This does make a lot of sense considering striped Yeezys in general tend to carry more demand than those without, but more importantly, this pair in particular was a highly sought after colorway back when we saw it in 2016, and now that we see it returning, similar to what we saw on the Belugas, there's of course an immense amount of demand on them. This incredible demand, combined with the likelihood of less than typical Yeezy 350 stock, I am confident that these should still remain profitable with a good margin. I'd expect these to perform in a similar manner to what we saw on the recent Yeezy 350 Dazzling Blue, if not a little bit better. Now, regarding a specific range, prices have already seen the vast majority of their pre-drop decrease following the initial rumors of this release many months ago. This leaves the current average at about $394 for sizes 4 to 12, but of course, this is just the pre-drop average. Remember, we tend to not include sizes like 12.5 and up, since those are often outliers and it tends to throw off the mean. We normally see a notable change post-US drop. This is when we normally experience what I like to refer to as the Impulsivity Effect. You guys should know what I'm referring to by now, as we discuss this very frequently, yet it almost always still occurs to some degree. Regarding this Impulsivity Effect, if you haven't watched my seller hold videos before, sneaker drops specifically impact human impulsiveness significantly after an individual fails to acquire that desired product due to insufficient supply and too much demand. Therefore, on average, we normally see about a 5 to 10% increase of the pre-drop prices post-drop. Now, that 5 to 10% is not always the case, such as when a sneaker is already slightly overvalued. For example, of course, the Beluga release was a perfect example of the contrary, where they actually decreased by 5% post-drop for the reasons I mentioned in the seller hold video, and that's precisely what we did end up seeing. When it comes to these Yeezy 350 Oreos, despite the massive demand that these do have, I'm actually not expecting a positive impulsivity effect as you may have expected. The reason for this revolves around there not being sufficient pre-sellers in the market right now to cause them to be oversold in the first place. Where we did see that on the Yeezy 350 Dazzling Blue or the Blue Tint, obviously there were a lot of pairs in circulation before the drop, and that led to them being slightly oversold, allowing for a little bit of an impulsivity effect too. Hence, when it comes to these Yeezy 350 Oreos, I actually feel that this current rate is actually rather justified. side. Even though demand is so high, I do feel it'll stay relatively the same. However, I would not go as far to expect a negative effect, in other words, a drop in price, considering there still are 2016 pairs in circulation being sold, and again, demand for this pair in general is very high. Hence, with a 0% increase and a 0% decrease, of course, prices would hypothetically remain at $394 on average, rather than increasing beyond that. I know, some really complex math this time. If I'm wrong, however, all the better, of course, we make more money, but either way, there is plenty of room for profit with a good margin, full throttle on these. Now, let's discuss what prices will look like when shipments go out in the 1 to 2 week range. During this period, the vast majority of pairs will be going into circulation, similar to recent Yeezys, such as the Dazzling Blue and Blue Tint 350s. I'd only expect about a 10% decrease in price rather than a full 15% decrease like we sometimes see. You may suspect that these may decrease even less, however, since these most likely will have less stock than those other 350s, but let's also consider that, again, as I mentioned earlier, there are less pre-sellers for these, which inflates the current price and leaves even more room for them to fall. So essentially, this sort of evens out. Hence, I'd expect more or less the same results as what we saw on the other Yeezys we just discussed, allowing for a 10% post-shipment range decrease for these. Therefore, with a 10% decrease, we may see the average of 4 to 12 dip to about $355 after all shipments go out within the 1 to 2 week range. So most of the larger sizes should remain in the upper 300 range, while the smaller sizes will likely dip to the lower 300 range, all of which still remaining profitable with a good margin. So again, I'm going full throttle on these. But now that the average price range at those points in time are evident, let's discuss whether they're expected to increase from that post-shipment price or even hypothetically decrease. When it comes to these Yeezy 350 Oreos, just like the Yeezy 350 Blue Tint that we discussed a few weeks ago, we actually have a perfect comparison for these, and that would be the Yeezy 350 Oreo itself, since these already released in 2016 and we have all the data for that. So what exactly did we see on these Yeezy 350 Oreos back in 2016? Well, considering Yeezy demand was much higher back then due to there being less variants in general, in addition to stock on these Oreos still being less than the general releases we see today, prices started at a whopping $500, making it seem like a good ROI would be extremely unlikely to achieve. However, within just over a year, these managed to hit the 800 range, allowing for about a 60% ROI. Even though Yeezy hype was higher back then, you must keep in mind how impressive a 60% ROI is, given that these started so high at $500. Now we look at these, and with the post-shipment average, they may potentially end up at only $350. This being much less than $500, of course, leaves much more room for good ROI, let alone a good chance at them increasing in general. Hence, I am expecting these to increase post-drop, just as we saw in 2016. Finally, regarding the hold margin on these, essentially, are these actually going to be worth your time, even if they do increase? Even though these are starting at a lower price than they did in 2016, $350 post-shipment for these compared to $500 in 2016, that does not mean I'm expecting a better ROI. The reason for this is simple. There is also much more stock in circulation right now, so I'm not expecting a better ROI because of that influx in stock, but regardless, I'm still expecting a good ROI in general, simply because of the immense demand these carry and how we saw these react in 2016 over time. Assuming prices stay the same as they are now post-drop, as I'm expecting, that means you'd be able to get $394 on average for them after the drop, so we'd use this number to calculate a potential ROI in the future. So with the 2016 stock, these were able to eventually hit $800 in value before they ended up dropping after rumors of this new release. I'm not expecting this to be possible again, unfortunately, due to this influx in stock. What I do believe is realistic, though, is seeing these eventually get back to the mid 500 range, potentially 550, and maybe even 600 long term. Hypothetically, if these do hit just 550, that would mean we'd be getting a 40% ROI off of these. If they reach 600 long term, maybe in a couple of years from now, then that's a 50% ROI. So that definitely is above average, but it's not insane. Regardless, that is certainly deserving of an above average rating, so I rated these a 6.5. compared to the Dazzling Blue, which I rated a 7.5, mostly because those Dazzling Blues are starting at an even lower price compared to these, allowing for an even better ROI potentially. Now, if I'm wrong on these Oreos, and these Oreos actually end up even lower than what the Dazzling Blues are at somehow, then that would only mean these are going to be an even better hold because there's even more room for better ROI. So while this may not be the best hold, and perhaps not as good as what I'm expecting the Dazzling Blue to be, it definitely does seem to be a pretty good one. So I'll personally be holding the majority of my pairs for around 2 years or so, but of course, that's just my opinion that I'm sharing, and this all might be completely wrong. I'm no wizard, but I can say for sure that I'm definitely hoping to get my personal size. Also, just a note in general, for anyone considering holding any item who does have low capital, you should never hold anything in general if you don't have sufficient capital to go for as many drops as possible at your full potential without holding back. If you do need money to go for all drops, try to sell these as soon as possible. Let me know what you guys are doing with your pairs down in the comments below. Since this is a discussion at the end of the day, I can't predict the future. This is just my personal analysis based on the data that I've acknowledged. We have a lot of brilliant minds watching right now, so I implore you to leave your notions down in the comments below. Anyway, that'll conclude it for today. Feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed, or perhaps if you learned a thing or two, subscribe and enable post notifications. This way you stay 100% updated on all hyped releases. Also, feel free to check out the links in the description below for reliable, fast, residential proxies and pre-verified Nike sneakers or Adidas accounts. Also, feel free to follow Endurance's Twitter for updates on restocks or key giveaways, and the same goes for Gargantua if you want to keep up with the progress or restocks. Last but not least, make sure to follow Keith Adam 10 and Personals for You. This way you guys stay updated on all urgent info like I was referencing today. With that though, I will see you guys later. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and of course, good luck on this release, or if you already copped, congratulations.